Good morning, everyone. My name is Debbie Mann. I'm with Festivals and Events Ontario, and thank you for joining us here at Tuesday Talks with FEO. So our guest today is Virginia Ludy. Virginia is a passionate, highly motivated event leader with over 35 years experience in the industry. And as the former CEO of the CNE, Virginia led a number of major initiatives that helped transform the CNE into an iconic, financially stable, must-see event. Virginia always sees opportunities where others may see none. She's a strategic thinker and visionary who believes nothing is impossible. As a strong advocate for our industry, Virginia is confident that the event industry will rebound stronger than ever. She believes new opportunities are on the horizon for our industry as it begins to fulfill its role in helping to re-energize and re-engage our communities. Thanks for joining us, Virginia. It's great to see you again.
Well, thanks for having me, Deb. I'm real thrilled to be here.
Thanks. You know, we were just talking earlier and I was trying to remember, I've been with FEO for 16 years, so I've known Virginia for at least 15 of those 16. And yeah, it's very cool, the people in this industry. So welcome, here we go. We're going to be talking about events, Virginia, the road to recovery. What have you been seeing? What have you been, what does the landscape look like? I mean, I know you've been in lots of conversations with people around the province and, you know, looking at where you can help and what people feel or it's going to happen in the future.
Well, I've certainly had I certainly had an opportunity to talk to folks in my network across not only the province but North America, and really different areas of North America are experiencing different comebacks. I know that in the U.S. right now, we're starting to see events reopen, and the U.S. seems to be, you know, some months ahead of us in their overall recovery. And so we're starting to see events open up again in the U.S. And of course, we've just heard the recent announcements that the Calgary Stampede will be opening this year, again, in some of the events in the western portion of the country. I think that Ontario, just because of the impact this pandemic has had on the province, it will, you know, our industry will probably be one of the ones in the latter time frame for reopening. But, you know, I think that it provides an advantage to event planners in that we can look at the lessons learned in those other jurisdictions, and we can see where they've had success and perhaps where there's opportunities to change strategically a little bit as new factors enter into our plans for reopening and reinventing ourselves.
Yeah, talk about reinventing ourselves. How do you, like, I can't even begin to imagine where the industry is going to go from here. The only thing that seems to be consistent is virtual or a hybrid event may be here to stay. But have you heard anything or anything about what that's going to look like?
I think certainly that if anybody thinks that we're going to go back to the environment that we were in before 2019 and prior, they're probably fooling themselves. I think that, you know, the event landscape has certainly changed. The competitiveness of the marketplace has changed. There's been a lot of shrinkage because a number of events perhaps won't continue in the future, but that will provide opportunities for other events for growth and expansion. I do think that the event marketplace was very cluttered, particularly in the Ontario region prior to the pandemic. So I don't know how much more growth in events the market would have been able to bear at that time. So I think that, we're going to see a very different marketplace. I think we're going to see very different consumer behavior. I know my behavior as a consumer has changed, as I'm sure everybody on this call, their behavior has changed. And I think that as we look at different groups within the marketplace, groups of consumers, there will be different behaviors that will be demonstrated. Some people may feel very comfortable coming back to events. Some folks may not feel so comfortable. And so the industry is going to have to be tolerant, and it's going to have to be very adaptable to really look at how consumers are going to react, and then how they change or modify their events to anticipate those changes in behavior and changes in consumption by consumers.
Yeah, and it's going to be a hit and miss, isn't it? Because we're not going to know how everybody, not going to know until we start getting events out there.
That's right. I think that there's going to be a steep learning curve. I think that certainly what we've seen in the States is some events have launched mini versions of their events, kind of to, dip their toe back in the water a little bit, and really get a sense of how consumers are going to react. I'm seeing a lot of attention being paid to operational modifications the events are going to have to make to create safe environments for their visitors to come to. But I think that, and there's been a lot of focus on that. There's a lot of material that's out there that's written around, how to keep people separate, how to control attendance numbers so that, you can ensure that you don't have these surges in crowds and interaction and that type of thing. And although those things are very important, I think that what's going to be more important to events is understanding how their visitors' behaviors have changed, how people are going to be consuming entertainment opportunities in the future, not only in events, but concerts, sports events, all of those things. And also looking at spending. Some folks have had a tough time during this pandemic, others haven't. And so what impacts that will have on the future of events. And really, the other thing to remember is that events have been out of market. Some of them will have been out of market for 2 seasons. That's significant. So, it's going to take some creative thinking and some resources to reintroduce themselves back into the marketplace and remind people of who they are and what they have to offer. I get very concerned when I hear about events coming back into the marketplace with perhaps a diluted or a watered down event, because quite frankly, I think some people coming back to your events, or new consumers coming back to your event, you don't want to disappoint them or have them leave your event with a feeling that they weren't, they didn't get their value for whatever their admission, if it's a gated event or if it's a free event. You really want them to leave with a really positive, upbeat experience, and so that they're going to go and talk to their friends and their neighbors about your event, and they're going to consider coming back and revisiting your event in the future. We certainly don't want to create events that are a disappointment. Now that's easy for me to say because I'm not running an event right now, and I'm not facing some of the challenges that events are facing, where there's tremendous financial challenges out there for events right now. And so for me to sit here and say, well, you should really be investing in that big blockbuster attraction to bring people back is easy for me to say. But, I would just caution people that putting a diluted event out there could have negative long-term effects on your ability to attract back your visitors. And I think, event organizers are going to have to be patient. I don't think that consumers are all going to come rushing back to your events in the first year. It's going to take a couple of seasons to probably get yourself back to where you're feeling comfortable with people attending your events. And I think that the type of event may drive some of that. Events that are gated events will have a much easier time at controlling the size of crowd, when people come, those types of things, versus street festivals or those other types of gatherings. So it's going to be an interesting journey. And I'm really hopeful that we can get a strong industry back, and one that will we'll start to see some growth, and we'll start to see expansion again, like we were experiencing before the pandemic.
Yeah, and it's interesting because innovation is going to be so important to this too, finding new ways to deliver the same thing. And one of the things that I've been hearing as well is supply and demand, because this pandemic has really impacted our suppliers. And so even if events have a good structure, a good plan, have the funding, will they be able to get their porta potties? Will they be able to get their fencing? All of that.
Well, and that goes right across the entire, if you look at your business, it goes across your entire business. So you're absolutely right. Are your suppliers still in business? Can they still provide the type of services that they delivered to you before? What's their infrastructure look like? It's some of the some of their equipment may have been sitting in warehouses or sitting outside for the last 2 years. What type of service are they going to be able to offer? And then there are some suppliers which really help you to drive revenues. I know in the industry that I was in, rides are a huge factor and a huge attraction. And, it's going to be interesting to see how many of those suppliers are left and what that industry will look like. And so I think organizers have to start thinking about, well, we should be considering what would happen if we couldn't get XYZ a supplier. Where would we go? What's an alternative programming element that we could add in, which would drive revenues, which would help us to recover what we've lost from that particular supplier versus something else. And so these are all questions and factors that event organizers are going to have to consider as they start getting their minds around planning for coming out of this. And I really feel for event organizers because it's been this industry has just been so negatively impacted. I mean, the restaurants we know in our communities and the small business owners have really been impacted. But I think the event industry is probably one of the worst hit industries. They were the first to close, and they may be the last industry to open. And so there are a lot of challenges, but I think there's also a lot of opportunities.
I agree. I think, and as you were talking, I was thinking, when we take a look at the information that we have here at FEO, we have there, from the $0 to $500 budget, events seem to be most of them in the industry. And then we have, 500 to over, multiple of millions. It's going to be I'm just wondering on a scale, who is going to survive that? I thought it would be the smaller ones, but they may be the ones who go away, and it's the mid-range ones that survive. I don't know.
Well, it's hard to tell right now. I think certainly those events that have fixed costs, be they, fixed capital costs that they're having to pay, or rental of facilities, office space, that sort of thing, or have paid staff. They're certainly going to be the ones that are being challenged, probably more financially than perhaps an organization that's very volunteer based, and perhaps doesn't have some or any of those costs that they have to continue to carry forward. So I think that there's certainly concern around the impact it will have on all of those different types of events. Smaller events, which are very volunteer based, may have difficulty in getting volunteers. The volunteers for events tended to be older folks, more my age group and older, and they may be the folks who are more reluctant to come out and participate in organized events down the road. So those events may have challenges in getting volunteers. On the other side of the coin, people, organizations that have paid staff, where perhaps they've had to cut back on staff, may have challenges in getting those staff back, because some of them may have moved on to other industries where it's more of a stable job environment. There may be a lot of corporate knowledge that leaves, that events struggle to get back, both in the small, medium, and large events. So these are all things that event planners have to be thinking about. There are a lot of seasoned event organizers and planners out there who have a vast amount of experience. And some of those folks we're going to lose. It's just like in the restaurant industry and other industries. People are moving out of these service industries and moving into other places where perhaps they will not be at as much risk of not having long-term employment as what we've seen. I never would have imagined 2 or 3 years ago that this industry would be facing this. I mean, who would have thought that this would be the outcome? But we're here, but it's time to start thinking about how do we rebuild. And this is where associations like FEO and other associations that events belong to, where they can really provide opportunities for helping to bring folks together through networking opportunities like this, where you can have shared ideas and really collaborate and work in conjunction with other event planners. Maybe the time has come for events to start sharing resources, not only and suppliers, but employees. Maybe there's opportunities there for, this, event A, B, and C to come together and say, look, we're facing we're facing financial challenges, and we're facing some shortfall in resources and getting the right people in to do the jobs that we need them to do. Is there an opportunity for us to share and have one person that provides whatever the job function is to this event, that event, and another event? And so there's some shared costs. It may not be the optimal situation in the long term, but maybe it's a short-term fix until you can get yourself back to a position where you've got enough of a recovery that you can now you're in a place where you can start to bring full-time people on. I know of some fairs when I was in the fair industry up in the Ottawa Valley who would do that. They would share volunteers, they would share equipment. They had their dates staggered so that they would move from one event to the next event, to the next event, to the next event. So, on this weekend we're here, the next weekend we're here, and they would just take all of those resources and move them about. And it's funny because when they used to come to our national convention, they would rent a bus and they would all come together on the bus to the national convention. So it really built a real environment of collaboration and a real team approach. Yet they were all responsible for their own individual events, but they supported the collective group. And it worked very well. And it's very successful.
And they're in harmony too. They know what needs to be done, when it needs to be, how long it's going to take to get done, and they refine it, right, over time. So
that's right. Yeah. And if there were challenges, they would have somebody that they could reach out to, and they could talk about, what was your experience? How did you address it? How did you get over that? And that those are important things to have, particularly in these times when I am sure there are many people in the event industry right now who are feeling very lonely, very uncertain about their future, concerned about the future of their events. And so this is why associations like this are so important to this industry, and why I would encourage event organizers to continue to participate in them and use them as a resource.
You know, years ago when I first started here, we had something called what we called networks, but it was exactly what that was. We went to different regions within the province and said, okay, you know, are there 10 events here that would like to share resources and volunteers and a building, like in, you know, pylons and fencing and signs, just so that you had a place that you didn't have to spend all the same money on
Right.
the same stuff and have duplicates. And it went really well for a while, and then it went away. And maybe something to that nature is it's timely for it to come back, at least for the short period of time.
Yeah, and I think that there's some positions and functions within an organization which is unique to that organization, and you probably need to maintain those because not everybody has the same offer. But you know, if you're looking at from a programming perspective, there are some programs that you may have that are similar to other programs. So maybe you have somebody who's shared for those types of events, and things that are unique, you keep somebody who's dedicated specifically to your event for that particular area that's run. But you know, it's learning from organizations like this. I know I sat in on a session the other week with Judy Haber, who was talking about sponsorship, and her specialty is naming rights. Now, years ago, when I thought about naming rights, I was very reluctant to, you know, oh, we can't do that to our brand. You know, we can't be, you know, our brand is so strong. We don't want to be sharing that with anybody. But now I think about it and I think, well, maybe for some events, that's a solution. Like maybe that's something that you need to be strongly considering, because that will now provide you with a revenue stream that you haven't had before, and it may help you to make up a shortfall in another area. So, you know, that's just an example of how the changes in the event environment will start to force people to think differently. And some of those sacred cows that we always protected, you know, maybe now it's time to start thinking about those things differently and being a little bit more open-minded about how we approach things, and what now we may have a palette for that perhaps we didn't have in the past.
And I hope too that, you know, people will continue, because I'm hearing that, you know, students are having a hard time wanting to come into the tourism industry and the event industry, and it's a hard sell to their parents in this day and age. You know, how am I, you know, going to spend all this money for what? But it's those young people, those innovators, those creators who, you know, we need them to come in and to shake up the industry a little bit.
Well, we have, I think we have a responsibility as event organizers to really help bring those folks along and bring them into the industry. When I started in the industry, I wasn't an event person. I mean, I started right out of university, and if it hadn't been for people who I could look upon as mentors to help bring me along, and you know, just when I'm scanning the names on this call, I see a number of people here who have a lot of deep experience, rich experience that they could be sharing with younger people coming up through, coming into their organizations, and really help to start to recreate that level of corporate knowledge that, you know, we all need to sustain our events, and really start to, you know, build that back again. So I would encourage people to look at, you know, as soon as they're able to, start looking at providing internship opportunities again, and providing opportunities for people who are just embarking into the industry, and start, you know, let's start getting the human resources growing again. Absolutely.
Hey, Kyle has a question. In your experience as an event organizer, what were examples of successful elements to create guest experiences that led to repeat attendance? And what trends do you imagine will drive this value in the coming years?
Well, I think that everything is around the guest experience, right? If people come to your event and they have an environment where they feel safe, they feel like they've gotten good value for their money, they're certainly going to return. And you know, it's easy. Some of the things that you can do are very easy. I mean, I remember my experience. We changed the color of the benches from ugly brown to bright, colorful colors that matched, you know, the corporate logo, and created more rest areas, and just created a more of a welcoming environment. And that really helped to elevate the experience of our customers and made it feel like a nicer environment. I think that, you know, we always need to be looking at our product and what can we do to enhance our product and make it a better experience for our customers. So, you know, you don't go into a McDonald's and the restaurant looks the same as it did 25 years ago. I don't know why there would be an expectation that we would go to our events and they would look the same as they've looked for the last 20 or 25 years. And quite frankly, there's some events that I walk into and I could probably walk around them with my eyes closed because it's the same layout, it's the same programs, it's the same elements. And so I think that probably what this pandemic is going to do is it's going to force organizations to look at their events and say, okay, let's just kind of wipe the slate clear and let's reinvent this thing. How can we, and this is the opportunity, this is the time to do it, because, you know, your customers have been away for a couple of years. So maybe they're more open and willing to look at change, but this is the opportunity and the time to do that.
Yeah, and I'm wondering too if it's going to be, because a lot of our members and a lot of events that I am familiar with are all not-for-profits or charities. And I'm wondering if there's going to be a resurgence of the, entertainers who, I can't remember who it is right now, coming in to recreate or create something new for the events that will be more of a for-profit experience as opposed to that humble not-for-profit focus.
Well, I think that, you know, a digital presence has certainly provided opportunities for that. So when we look at things like, you know, when I started the industry, ticketing was you went up to the ticket box, you bought your ticket. It was a hard ticket and somebody ripped it and put it in a box and you walked in. That was ticketing.
Yeah.
And we, you know, never really, other than the concert industry, and even then you had to go to a kiosk to buy your tickets. There was nothing that was beyond that. And now we have all of these digital platforms. We have different ways to buy tickets. And I think that those organizations, those events that were in that space prior to the pandemic probably have an advantage. But it certainly provides us with an opportunity to sell our products differently, because now we can sell ticketing based on time and date. So you come in at this time and this date, and that's your time slot for when you enjoy the event, which helps us to control crowds and those types of things. Certainly selling tickets in advance. That provides what, you know, we all call rain insurance and money in the bank prior to the event happening. Being able to, you know, run online shopping experiences for our customers, doing certainly different ticketing packages that you sell throughout the year, and also looking at VIP packages, because now I think consumers will probably be more open to that. In the past, there was kind of a, you know, there was some resistance to that. Well, you know, well, why is that person paying extra dollars to get to the front of the line? What about me? And now there may be more of an acceptance of that type of activity. And so those are for the paid, obviously for the paid events. But I also think that, you know, it's provided a lot of opportunities for people, for event organizers to take elements of their events and provide them over, electronically or digitally. So, I know you had Charlie Johnston on from the Royal Winter
Yeah.
Fair many
Yeah.
months ago, and he talked about some of their competitions and their cooking shows that they did online as a virtual experience. And that some of those things, they even once they get back into business of operating an on-site or a live event, they will keep some of those elements in a virtual space, because they found that they can, the experience is a good experience for their customers. They can provide those types of activities throughout the year. It's not all focused on one period of time. Um, and they've also learned to monetize that. He talked a little bit about how they had these fireside chats with leaders in the equestrian industry. And if you were an equestrian person, you could sit down and have a fireside chat with some guy, halfway around the world who was a leader in that industry. And that was great value to those people, and they were willing to pay for that experience. And so it's creating all sorts of new opportunities outside of the physical event space and the dates of when you hold your on-site event, versus having more of a year-round presence. And that's one of the challenges I think that all events face is, you're in market and then you're out of market and you're
Right.
gone for a year. Then you've got to come back in and remind everybody that you're on, and then tell them all the exciting things that you have to offer. And that can be timely, and it can also be expensive to do. So if you can create a presence where you have these little bits of activity that happen throughout the year on in a virtual space, and then leading up to it builds excitement, and it builds a following throughout the year. So it's it's relatively inexpensive to do. I mean, obviously there are some organizations who have paid staff who do that, but there's other organizations who may have volunteers within their wheelhouse who can do those things. Or you may use it as an opportunity for an internship for a student who has knowledge and experience in those types of areas. But certainly it's provided new opportunities. Now, I think that, we have to be a little bit careful, because I think that there may be some folks may be getting a little bit tired of some of the virtual stuff. However, I think it's a way of augmenting, and it's a nice add-on to your event, as opposed to, I'm not suggesting you would do it in replace of your event, but I think it's something that you can utilize very effectively to continue in the marketplace throughout the year. And it just helps to build awareness. And, I know some events have merchandise shops and also, online, all sorts of things. So I think the sky's the limit there.
I think so too. I think it's exciting where technology is going. We've had some people on who have some exciting technology where you can be sitting at home, and they send cameras around the world to have people do things or have different groups participate. So it's pretty exciting that way. And I just think that there's opportunities like that for reinvention and sponsorship and funding. And that also, there was something I saw recently about how to keep your events funded throughout the year, like providing after or revenue throughout your year, throughout your event. So how do you do that so that you can remain solvent?
Yeah, and so using those platforms to and monetizing them, right? And it was interesting. I was talking to a CEO of an attraction in Ontario, and he said, at first people came out and they provided all this stuff free, and he said, we can very easily monetize that, and they have monetized it very effectively, and in some cases it's very appropriate and it works well, and then other events may have a blended approach, right? Some things may be free, some things may be you may have to pay a fee for, but it certainly provides lots of opportunities for promoting your partners, provide you with just another platform to really help to leverage some of those corporate relationships that you may have too. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities there, and I think that virtual and digital is here to stay. I don't think that it's going away once we come out of this pandemic. I think that it will be a key, important element of most events offering.
Yeah, and I'm just, honestly, as hard as it has been, I'm excited to see where people are going to go in the future. Like what innovation is going to come from this, where they're going to reinvent themselves, how they're going to do it, how they're going to engage people. I'm just excited
Right.
to see where it's going. Just a few things that I've seen and understand right now.
Well, and I think that one of the and if there is a benefit of this pandemic, but it's allowed event organizers to kind of pause
Yeah.
and really give some thought to their events, because the events industry is a very busy, dynamic, always moving industry. I know, and I know that many of my colleagues in the industry share, people would say, well, you work for an event, what do you do the rest of the year?
I
Well,
know.
it's a year-round business, and you're always busy. So this has provided an opportunity for people to kind of sit back and reflect a little bit about what they're doing. And I would encourage event organizers to use this time for those types of things. Let's look at our event top to bottom, where they should be looking at every single aspect of their business and saying, okay, is it still relevant? Yes, no. Do we park it for a while? Do we enhance it? Or where are the new opportunities that we can present out there? And they need to do that in the context of being aware of how their customers' behavior has changed. And I was reading an article the other day around, they were talking to this couple, middle-aged couple, very well-educated in the States. And they said, although things are opening up, we don't feel comfortable going into a movie theater. So we're going to do movies in our home theater at our home. Now they have the resources to do that. But that just demonstrates how things have changed. So, what kind, if you were a movie theater owner, what things could you do to change that experience to get them back and to get other folks back? Now, some folks won't be reluctant to come back. They may just be raring to get out and to go. And I think certainly, the last few weekends where the weather's been nice, we've certainly seen that with outdoor activities, people at beaches and walking and cycling and those types of things. But I think it's going to take some time, but I think it's really imperative on industry leaders to understand how customer spending is changing, how customer behavior is changing, because those are things that you need to pay attention to. Because if you come back and you're not hitting the mark with your customers, you won't have people at your events. So you really need to understand that, and to be able to address those changes as they come along.
And it's there, the other thing too is municipalities, because there's a lot of municipalities who run events, but who those event organizers have to have a strong relationship with their municipalities as well, because they're, much of the events are run on city property. So, it's going to be interesting to see how municipalities address this, and how they themselves reinvent events within their own scope.
Right. And just what their requirements are going to be to operate
Yeah.
on their sites, right? I mean, and I think that will probably be true, whether you're operating on a space that is a public-owned space within the public domain, or whether you're operating on a private space, because everybody is going to want to ensure that you've taken the measures you need to take to mitigate risk as much as possible. And so that's going to be another layer of oversight, another layer of probably regulation that you're going to have to meet. It's funny, when I think about the event industry, we're probably one of the most regulated industries. When you think about, if you have rides at your site, you've got, regulations on that. You've got regulations by, around crowds and security and, health and food and all of those things, right? And so this will be another layer. But you know what? Events are very good at adapting and working with regulators in a very positive way. And so I feel that they'll be able to address those requirements. There'll be a little bit of growth there probably that will have to take place, a little bit of give and take. But I think that, you know, at the end of the day, everybody is thinking about the same thing. How do we create a fun, safe environment for people to come back and enjoy our events?
Right.
And it's going to take a little bit of patience, but I think that we'll get there.
Judy, Virginia, have you heard anything at all about insurance for events in the future?
I have not, but I would imagine that perhaps coming out of this pandemic, there may be some challenges. I know that in the restaurant industry, there were some challenges around getting insurance, and I don't know where that stands right now. But whether that will migrate into the event industry, who knows?
Right.
I guess that will, you know, remain to be seen. But certainly, I think that it's something that organizers should start looking at sooner than later, because we all require insurance, right?
Yeah, just to make sure that they can afford to put their event on just based on the insurance.
Oh yeah, I mean, insurance costs are quite hefty for this industry, and so yeah, it will be interesting to see if there is an impact on what those premiums are.
Right. I don't have any other questions for you. Are there any questions from our guests or participants? I know that I don't see anybody wanting to ask anything. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you would like to talk about?
Well, I think that, you know, at the end of the day, this has been a very difficult time for all event organizers. But I think that, you know, brighter days are on the horizon. I think it's unfortunate that perhaps some events may not continue, but I think that's going to create opportunities for new events. And so as event organizers, when one door closes, another door opens, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that, you know, we will get back to a level at some point in time where there will be a robust event environment once again. It's just a question of when that will happen. But, you know, in this market, it looks like the event industry is kind of going to be on hold until the fall. And then I think, you know, you'll start to see things start to reemerge. But that provides an opportunity for events that are going to be delayed until next spring or next summer, an opportunity to really, you know, come out of the gates roaring, because I think at that point in time, there will be, you know, your ability to have more of a major presence will be much better at that point in time. And you'll also be able to have, you know, kind of lessons learned from other events that are opening. And so it will provide opportunities. But as I've said before, it's going to be, I cannot emphasize this enough, is that we need to understand how consumer behavior is going to change and how consumer spending is going to change and what impacts those will have. And also bringing our events back to life on the best foot, really trying to provide as grand an event as you can, so that your customers have a great new experience at your events, and they go out and tell all of their friends and relatives why your event was so great and that they should attend. And, you know, if we can do that, provide a great product, I think that we'll see events starting to have the same success that they were having prior to this pandemic.
Wonderful. Virginia, are you available for consulting, for support?
Sure. Listen, if anybody has questions or they want to talk to me further, or I'm always open to having those conversations. I don't know if you're going to provide my contact information.
I can, yeah.
But certainly I would encourage anybody, if you want to have a further discussion with me, absolutely, please don't hesitate to give me a call or drop me an email. I'm always happy to talk. And always, you know, I've spent my entire career in the event industry. I want to see this industry come back, and I want
Yeah.
to see it come back roaring and be successful. And if there's anything I can do to help any of the events accomplish that, I'm here and I'm willing to do that.
Thanks, Virginia. And maybe what we'll do is we'll invite you back. Let's see. Okay. Invite you back. You know, you were talking about roundtables and brainstorming. I thought, when you said that, I thought, oh, it'd be great to get some people together, maybe 5 or 10 people together in a virtual room, and just like banter back and forth about ideas. So if you're willing to come back and do that, that would be great.
Absolutely. Be my
Wonderful.
pleasure.
We have it, will they come? Oh, have it and they will come. Gangbuster event, but not the attendance. It's scary to think about that part, but what is the budget, and are we guessing on what the event will make?
Well, I think, yeah, I think that that's, you know, each individual event planner is going to have to consider that, and they each know their own situation and how much they can invest into into their product development, and what type of risk they are, you know, how risk tolerant they are. So, you know, you're going to have to base it based on your own events circumstances. But all I'm suggesting is that events that come out, which I think perhaps are diluted or aren't at the level that they once were, run the risk of some of their visitors perhaps not having a great experience, and then that having implications or impacts on future visits. That's all I'm suggesting. Now, you know, maybe some of your customers will be quite understanding and they'll be just happy to be out. I don't know, but I just, you know, I would be concerned about, really diluting your event down and just not creating the experience.
Right.
And you know, being up to that level.
George Arujo from Norfolk says, thank you, Virginia. Great to see you.
Oh, thank you, George. Good to see you again. George is one of those guys that I've known for years in the event industry.
Yep.
Events at Norfolk County Fair, and it's a great event. If you ever want to go to a great fall fair, that's the one to go to.
Thanks, Virginia. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us. Next week, we have Virginia Breitenfield. She's going to be talking about adaptability quotients. So that's, it's not IQ, EQ, it's AQ. So that's going to be fun, and she's very engaging, and I hope you'll be able to join us. Thanks, Virginia. Again, always a pleasure. And thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll see you next week. And as Jay had mentioned, this will be recorded and put on our YouTube channel for everyone to see it again. So thanks to everyone. Bye. Bye, Virginia. Bye-bye.